On today's show, coming up on the Bucs Report, we're diving deep into the upcoming NFL draft and what it could mean for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's get it. Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holmi. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find us online. It's BucsReport.com. So in this edition of the Bucs Report, Clint Gross joins us as we talk about the upcoming NFL draft and how the Buccaneers could get a lot better. Now, the big news breaking yesterday, of course, is Mike Evans is gone. He is now a 49er, so a lot of questions about the direction in which this Buccaneers team could go. There's been a big power vacuum, if you don't know, the last 5 years or so with Tom Brady and that circus leaving town. So this team needs some big upgrades. So first of all, Clint, thanks for joining us on this edition of the Bucs Report.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So let's just get into it here. Talking about the draft, the Buccaneers are picking 15th overall in this year's draft. And they currently hold 7 selections overall: 15, 46, 77, 116, 155, 195, 229. Oh my. Plus a potential compensatory pick as well from a draft strategy standpoint. How valuable is that kind of draft capital for a team picking in the middle of round one?
I think this year we'll see lesser movement round one than maybe typically, with this not being as much of a top-heavy class, anticipating much, much more so next year. So as far as movement there, I think we can all anticipate the Bucs staying at 15. But 7's a solid number. I think as far as the second rounder, the sweet spot of this draft for the value really is that stretch from about 45 to 75. So being right there at the forefront of that, I think it is big, particularly when you look at the moves that were made yesterday and really open some more of that flexibility to not be pigeonholed into specific spots. Extending K-Dot, and you don't have to go tight end necessarily. The addition of Alex Anzalone from Detroit, linebacker was one that was pointed at so often, particularly looking at that 15th pick or the second rounder. So typical Jason, giving himself a best player available ability.
Yeah, so when we take a look at the upcoming draft, some excitement for me at the end of the day, because like I say, the Buccaneers definitely need to make some improvements. Is the middle of the first round often considered a value pocket in the draft in your estimation?
I don't know that I necessarily would say that. I think, going back to my comment, I think with this year for the Bucs, it could be a case of just any draft, you're going to see somebody, quote unquote, a faller, just the way the board falls, teams before you needs. This year with the lack of top heaviness, I don't know that I would necessarily say that, but look, at 15, I went into yesterday with the thought process of names like a Kenyon Sadiq, tight end out of Oregon, C.J. Allen, linebacker out of Georgia. Those two needs, like I said, with the Anzalone addition and the Otten extension, aren't as pressing at this point, planning into next year. It really gets interesting. Mike Evans leaving yesterday for San Francisco, such as you said. Does there become more urgency to get another young receiver in there with Emeka Egbuka? Do they look to add another corner into the room? And having said a couple of those 3-4 positions, and you even add a pass rusher, if they fall in love with a young nose tackle with an aging Vita Vea, even though he is still Vita Vea, I do think there is that natural value for the Bucs specifically at 15, just because they're not going to get pigeonholed into taking one spot. If they look up and a pass rusher that they had 8th on their board is sitting there at 15, they're going to take them. If they look up and a corner that they had at 9 on their board is there, they're going to take them. And that's what great teams do. So that made me even more, I am a Falcons fan, so I didn't love it from that perspective. But just as someone that covers the draft for all 32 teams, particularly the Anzalone edition, got me really excited as far as, a team sticking to, you hear everybody preach about value and best player available. Well, you actually saw that yesterday, and, we'll see what comes at day 2 here.
Okay, so when teams sit at pick 15, are they usually sticking strictly to their board or leaning towards needs in your estimation?
I think every team's going to tell you best player available, and this being the case in Tampa, I really do think so. Like I said, not to be repetitive, but if they hadn't have done one of those 2 additions yesterday, I'd have had a hard world not imagining Sadiq out of Oregon getting a really strong look. Versus, I think he really gets a look at Carolina after the moves they made at 19. Same as far as linebacker. But no, I think Tampa's totally in a spot. It's going to be best player available for them. And for it to have been 14 picks ahead of them and the variance across teams about who they have in their top 15, they're going to get someone at 15 that they deem a value. That the 15th player that they take that spot is not going to be the 15th player or lower on their board. They're going to get what they consider a discount. And I think a nice sweet spot there in the middle of the first round for a team that really doesn't have as much work to do as your typical 15th overall pick.
If we take a look here at Jason Light and kind of receive some criticism, kind of putting the Buccaneers in the position that they're in, they keep going all in on Todd Bowles and, living on former glory, winning the NFC South. Well, it didn't happen this year. So if you're Jason Light, are you staying patient or are you exploring trade scenarios?
I don't think necessarily the aggression has to be as far as the roster. I would have thought the aggression would have been in Cannon Bowles personally. I think, and again, hand raised, I am a Falcons guy. So the Zach Robinson addition, as far as an offensive coordinator, we did not have a positive experience. Doesn't mean you won't have a positive experience. But I say that to say, I think some of this, what you'll see sometimes with head coaches where they kind of get to that last scapegoat where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to can my coordinators and bring in somebody new and say that was the problem. He's used up his chips there. And from a talent standpoint, where's the glaring holes on this team, particularly in relation to your competition in the NFC South? The Panthers did get a lot better yesterday. Jalen Phillips addition, Devin Lloyd, that one in particular I thought was a great value late last night. Falcons had more depth, smaller moves. And then held the Saints, going to get an ETN out of Jacksonville at running back. All that to say, going back to your comment about kind of leaning back on some of those NFC South titles, since the Super Bowl with Brady, with Bowles, and trying to kind of force that. The South is not getting lesser. It's not staying stagnant. And I won't even comment on my team because, in relation to yesterday, we didn't really do anything earth-shattering. But Saints and the Panthers did. It's like to the point of there is aggression in those organizations as from a personnel standpoint. There's not as much holes here, but I just wonder, like I said, you've used up all your scapegoats here this season, and I'm telling you something you already know. Y'all look up at the end of the year and the Panthers win it again or something. Bowles is a goner, and he knows that too.
Yeah, so we take a look at, historically what the Bucs have done here. Tampa has built a strong reputation as a drafting organization under Light. When you look at players like Wirfs, Antoine Winfield Jr., Godwin, YaYa Diaby, How respected is the Buccaneers scouting department, in your opinion, around the league?
Look, I've long said that I believe Jason Licht is the most underrated GM in the NFL. I think he is teetering on that top 5 GMs in the league. He's definitely a top 10 GM in the league. I know, particularly in y'all's fan base, there's some thoughts, like I said, as far as retaining bowls and what the decision's been made with that coaching staff. But I also think that's, got to be mentioned a testament to the Glazers. They are a fantastic ownership. They're very patient, history of winning. But having said that, no, I think it's very, very well respected. And you see that, in the interest from other teams looking at your personnel as well in the scouting department. I mean, I could lean back on John Spytek getting the Raiders GM job, being one of the hotter names, as kind of the up-and-comer guy that it was his turn for an opportunity. Like my Falcons just getting Ian Cunningham, who's kind of been that guy for 2 or 3 years with the Bears under Ryan Poles. Like in the scouting department is somebody that people like to look and poach from. I mean, and you look at recent examples of – I like how the Bucs don't get cute. And the perfect example of that is taking Emeka Egbuka where you did. So many people talk about that Jackson Smith and Jigba pick, and justly so, at 25 for the Seahawks. Classic. Everyone else in the league overthought it. The Nick Eamon-Warry pick for the Seahawks. And I use that just as a parallel because John Schneider is a top 2 GM in this league. Undoubtedly, I think at this point he's earned that. But that to say, there's similarities with the Bucs as far as we're going to take a really good football player. We're not going to get cute here. You could even go less star power, a first-round pick. Look at that Tyke Smith pick, at a nickel spot out of Georgia that everyone was kind of saying, oh, we're trying to figure out a spot for him. And oh, some of his best tape was earlier on in his career. It's like, yeah, and they've turned the guy into an absolute stud. You could keep going down the list. Jacob Parrish has been a big hit. Getting ahead of things before it's too late. Like I mentioned the Vita Vea spot earlier. It's like not going to surprise me if they get the next big nose tackle in the middle of this 4-3 before he leaves the building to work under him. Just over scouting to GM executives, traits that come with consistent winners in this league. And that's what the Bucs have been. I know, like I said, in y'all's fan base, there's some disgruntlement just as far as recently, but look, I say this is the Falcons guy. I would surely trade your last couple of years. I mean, I sound like I'm being a smart aleck, but it's the truth.
Yeah, I hear that. You take a look at the Falcons. There was a lot of talk that they were going to take big steps forward last season, but sometimes things don't always go according to the script here. But when fans talk about Tampa's biggest need, the conversation almost always starts with edge rusher, because right now YaYa Diaby looks like a long-term building block, but the Bucs still need another consistent pass rush threat. How urgent is that need in your estimation?
I would say urgent for the points you just said, but urgent also in relation to the other personnel you have at other spots on the team. It's like quarterbacks handled and fine. Running backs handled and fine. Receiver, yeah, Mike Evans, when was the last time that Mike Evans hasn't been on the Buccaneers? I was, like a senior in high school. If you can look at me, I do not look like a senior in high school at this point in my life. Yeah, I mean, at tight end, with Otten, I think that's handled as well. You look at the offensive line, you got some studs in Wirfs, Barton. Gedecke's played well. You like what you're seeing out of Mouch. So offensively, really, outside of having to kind of just figure this era change, and the closest I can speak to that is when Julio got traded to the Titans from us. It was like, wow, dude, I hadn't done this in a decade. As far as the secondary, you guys have got plenty of starting talent there. I mean, to the point of, as far as you're too deep, it's like I'm excited to see what you get out of Benjamin Morrison here in year 2 as somebody who got taken in the second round as a potential top 15 pick until he was battling some injuries with a hip down the stretch. And then, just anticipating at linebacker, similar to what I just said about Mike Evans. I mean, it feels like it feels like it's been 15, 20 years, which it has at this point, since I was yelling at the TV for the Falcons to take Lavonte David in the second round to only take Peter Cons, who, there's a reason you didn't recognize that name when I just said it. But yeah, I mean, kind of tangent, you haven't run through all that. I think it's just urgent in relation to the other needs as far as needing another young body, but not to the point that they're sitting there pigeonholed at 15. Like, oh man, we're going to watch this tier of the edge rushers go. And I consider Arvell Reese a linebacker, but we're going to see David Bailey go. We're probably going to see Ruben Bain go. Oh, now, well, we got to take the third guy on the board no matter who it is and where we have him. No, they don't. There's a lot of good. And when I say depth, I don't mean like rotational depth. No, just starting caliber potential in this edge class, second, third round. You'll see a lot of variance as far as how teams rank those guys in the, edge 7 to edge 15 or so, particularly dependent on scheme and the size profiles. But there is the potential, particularly with a staff such as Likes, for them to look up in the second or third and be like, oh, wait, this guy was higher on our board than this. This is the value for us with some of those larger profile edges. And, lastly, I mean, there is very much a world where they look up at 15 and they love a Keldrick Falk out of Auburn at 6'6", 276 with all of that run defense, and developing pass rush for them to take a swing. But, beyond that, they don't have to do it. If they do it, it'll be a testament to them telling you that they had him higher than 15 on their board.
So talking about names being circulated out there, one name frequently connected to Tampa, is Texas A&M edge rusher Cassius Howell. What stands out about Howell as a prospect for you?
Everyone's going to mention the really short arms. You could go and get that out of the way. Some historically short arms, just a hair over 30 inches, one of the lower we've seen here in the 2000s. But putting that aside and looking at him on the tape, I mean, just incredible burst, hot motor, guy that gets after the quarterback, the speed profile that would be a really nice addition here. And he has been so often mocked. It almost became like that unanimous mock pick at 15 for the Bucs here for the last few weeks, months leading up to the combine. And I think that really sets up this nice range to project him, that it's like, okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, y'all have the 46th pick in the second round. It's like, and this is being a whole round broad, but it's like, there's no world where y'all pass him up if he's there at 46, even with the production, the need, the speed, hot motor. You look at and some of his history as far as what I said earlier, they don't get cute. They take football players. They take guys with good attitudes. They take guys with good reputations coming out of their colleges. They're not typically the team that's going to go take the bet on something like that. Take it back to my Falcons, for example. They're not going to be the team that goes and takes James Pierce Jr. and is like, we're going to be special and nobody else wants to do this. We can make him behave. They're not going to do that. Right. Howell's a great guy. It's a complete profile. It's just the arm length. But somebody like and company look at that, and that's the potential for a discount. If you see that as far as his hand usage, his pass rush moves, his ability to use leverage, where he kind of makes up that ground versus being somebody that has a little longer arms. No, I mean, Howell's 100% circled for the Bucs, wherever that may be, whether that's in a trade down in the first. Like I said, I don't anticipate a lot of that, or a floor more so at 46. I can guarantee you that his camp has Tampa circled as a likely destination.
Yeah, another name out there that's circulated quite a bit is Ruben Bain from Miami. What kind of player is Bain?
Well, not to sound repetitive, but I mean, it's the fact that the two of them really are historically short arms in the edge class when we look back at the last 2 decades or so. But I mean, his power profile is just dominating. His production is dominating. 9.5 sacks this past season, opposite of Akeem Mesidor, who turned in 12.5 sacks himself, getting freed up there with Bain kind of as the one. strong side pass rusher. I mean, Bain is in that 265, 270 range. Great anchor, great run defender, hot motor, production, very well-spoken guy, was a high-profile recruit going back to his recruiting days. Ton of experience at Miami. It's like I said, it really is a complete profile outside of him having shorter arms. But I think even with Bain, it's even easier to lean back on the fact it's like, yeah, and he had those short arms when he was arguably the most dominant player in college football this past season. And that's all the way up with elite competition to the point of being in the national championship game. I mean, he has gone against as good at tackles as he could. And look, he knows his projection is high in this to have not participated in the combine, really went there and did interviews. And this isn't something new. I mean, we've heard it all year talking about that. You take away, and I'm just talking about media. If you took away this whole short arm narrative, we wouldn't even be talking about him with the Bucs, because the tape and the production and the translation to the league, we'd be going like, this dude's going top 5, no doubt. Right. So yes, if it is the case where league circles, somebody gets a little skittish as far as the arm length, or somebody has a preference for somebody with a bigger trait there, you look up at 15 and Ruben Bain staring you in the face, like will run the card in like his hair's on fire.
Yeah, and a lot of positions to address here, and kind of looking into the future and, some uncertain things, right? Because another major storyline for the Bucs is eventually replacing Lavonte David. He's been one of the greatest linebackers in franchise history, of course. And a question is how important is it for the Buccaneers to begin to prepare for that transition?
Well, look, it's pretty tough. A pretty tough plate for him to get to say that he's the best linebacker in franchise history when you got the Derrick Brooks of the world in Tampa. Most places he'd be getting that without an argument. So that's worth mentioning as well. I mean, look, I don't think you're going to find anybody outside of the Bucs fan base or media that speaks as highly and thinks as highly on the field of Lavonte David. Like I said, that one's been haunting me forever. But to your point, I thought that was a good move yesterday, signing Anzalone. Particularly, you got a discount on him. I mean, I believe those reports 100% that he took a smaller deal with you all because he wanted to be in Tampa. He is Florida Gators through and through, signed there out of the state of Pennsylvania in high school. That's definitely more of a home move for him as he gets into the latter stage of his career. He's productive as all get out. Had a great last few seasons with Detroit. When I saw that one, that was when I was like, man, that's a good signing for you all. As far as somebody maybe younger, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to be stunned even with this addition to look in that first round 2 or 3, particularly if they look up and the value's just staring them in the face. I mean, though I don't imagine CJ Allen at 15, this is just good perspective example. Yeah, if like and company have CJ Allen, and like I said, this is hyperbole a little bit. If they look up and they have CJ Allen as the 7th, 8th best player on their board, and he's staring them in the face at 15, they're going to take him, and justly so. But look, it's not as urgent the fact that David's still playing at a high level. It's just urgent the fact that I would imagine if you asked him, he knows, like, yeah, this might be it this next year or so, particularly depending on how y'all go. For example, y'all go to a new head coach after this season. He might say, I've done this enough times. I'm done. Versus if y'all make a serious run here in the playoffs. But it goes back again, not to be repetitive, but you're not in pigeonholed positions of urgency where it's like, dude, we don't have a body. I tie it back just because it's a rival. It's in the division. Speaking on it, my Falcons have gotten pigeonholed in the fact, we went and added Alameda Zaccheaus yesterday as a familiar receiver 3, receiver 4 depth piece. We went and signed Jahan Dotson, and with the price point, I anticipate they think he's going to be the 2, former first-round pick. They've pigeonholed themselves in a spot. Like, if they didn't even have that, beyond Drake London, they're looking around in the room, and it's like, there's no one here. There's no one here. Y'all don't have spots like that anywhere, even with that at linebacker. And you saw that in the move yesterday with Anzalone. That gave you that much more breathing room as far as urgency.
So when we take a look here, the offense, of course, runs through Baker Mayfield. In your estimation, how important is it for Tampa to keep building around him?
I mean, undoubtedly, there's not going to be a replacement of Mike Evans and what he means to this team and this city immediately. I mean, I know you know that. I'm not telling you some cutting edge thing there. But even having said that, there was the anticipation of this with the Emeka Egbuka signing. I have to see as far as Chris Godwin. I know seen some good things out of Jalen McMillan. Otten is familiar, and there's some good cohesiveness with Baker. And that offensive line is strong. Bucky Irving, hand raised, is one of the bigger misses that I've had covering the draft in the last few years, and that I wasn't really that fired up going into the draft. Y'all take him, proceeds to go be an absolute stud. Raise my hand, was wrong on that one. And every bit in there with the strong, Bijan, now ETN in New Orleans, Bucky in Tampa, as far as the strong running backs as an identity in the NFC South. But continuing to add, because like I said, for all you know, you look up and Godwin's wrapping up here. They got to have another one at receiver. The Otten extension, feel solid about. Wouldn't be crazy for them to say they're going to go get somebody who's strictly a receiving threat there. The offensive line, really, it's like, if you saw an opportunity to upgrade off the top of my head, like a Bredesen or something, someone there, I think it's a constant theme, but there's also such a high floor. It's really, as far as surrounded with talent, I think it'd be more of a comment on your leash with Zach Robinson as the play caller is just going to be so deathly short this first year, because if Bowles is gone, he's gone. And if Bowles isn't gone, outside of y'all making some serious run this year, if it's like he barely ekes through it, he doesn't have the breathing room to limp into the next year with somebody that isn't viewed as a strong play caller. I mean, I don't know Zach Robinson personally, but I can definitely assume that he was looking at his wife with this move to Tampa and was like, oh, yeah, this is a great job, and I'm thrilled to have it, but we might not be living here that long. Right. He's got to hit the ground running. And again, you could tie that back into the draft picks. If they look up best player available and they're like, dude, this is somebody who can give us a major boost here for a new offensive play caller, and Baker and some of our already strengths, but we can take it to another level. No, absolutely.
All right, last one here for you. It's really early. I mean, the NFL season wrapped up, the Super Bowl not too long ago. How do you see the NFC shaking out next season? I know you're a Falcons fan. Kind of, if you're going to place it first through last in the NFC South, how do you see it shaking out in a really early take here?
Talking about the South, and I'd still tip the cap to y'all or Carolina at this point. I think as far as my Falcons, yes. Am I more excited about the potential with Stefanski than Ra? Yes. But also understand it's the first year in a new regime. Just going to have to see as far as the quarterback. That's not something that is solved compared to you all, and that being the biggest factor. I think some of the noise, just speaking in terms of yesterday, as far as just a difference versus what we saw last year, to have had 8-9, and then the Saints, who got really strong down the stretch, haven't gotten Tyler Shuck rolling, and Kellen Moore more tenured in that first year as head coach. The South, we're about to lose this narrative of this being like non-competitive, not as exciting a division. I mean, in terms of like 1, 2, 3, 4, it's up for grabs. Like, even in terms of looking at last year, it's like I could sit here and look at you and say that I think the Saints win it all as far as the division, and it wouldn't be like I was stoned saying it. And that goes back to your point about it's really early. But as far as prediction, you got to feel good about y'all. You got to feel good about the Bucs. I would put us battling the Saints in that 3 spot unless something changes. Or if Penix comes out really healthy and hits the ground running, if we've my Lord, particularly with the Tyler Algier exit yesterday, I imagine Bijan's really ready to be training because he's going to have so many touches next year. He's about 90% of the offense. But no, it's, and you can hear I sound a little like, but if I had to pick one, I would still lean with Carolina. Just the fact they won it last year. There's not questions as far as their head coach. Canales is in good standing there. The really strong 2 defensive additions yesterday, particularly that Devin Lloyd one was money at 3 years, $45 million. They've really raised the floor on this defense to a point of there's not really holes, particularly if they can keep J.C. Horn healthy at a corner 1 spot. They got to get another weapon offensively. Tedero McMillan can't do it all. Like I said a while ago, I think they're very much circled for Kenyon Sadiq as the tight end freak of the class. So I'd mention them probably at the 1, y'all at the 2. I'm going to give the Falcons the 3 and the Saints the 4. But it would be like saying the Panthers here and y'all right here up on them. The difference just being there's not heat on their head coach. There's not heat on their play caller coming out of the gate as much as you all.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. Sometimes these early season predictions don't play out. Like I talked about the Falcons, and, there's certain things like the Saints, the glaring deficiency last year, and kind of since Drew Brees was there, is not a strong quarterback. Certain things that you think, if you fix this, you're a much better football team. But listen, Clint, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report. Why don't you tell everyone where we can find you online?
Yeah, thanks for having me. As far as finding me, one-stop shop. It can be a Twitter, my name, Clint Gross, or my handle at NFL Draft Dome. You can find me with the same handle on YouTube as well. But really, the easy way to put it, one-stop shop on Twitter. Any kind of content I have, written or on air, will all go through the Twitter. I'm very active there.
All right. Once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report, and I'll talk to you again next time. All right.